Okay, this next one's going to be a little long, but I'll do my best. An hour later, Jesse headed back up to Route 3 with 4 black garbage bags of video game consoles and handhelds piled into the back of his camper. He stashed the Santa sack back down into the passenger footwell. It was his golden ticket, and he intended to keep it close. He pulled into the salvage yard on the outskirts of town and tried to avoid the larger potholes as he drove past a few grungy outbuildings and a handful of wrecked semi-trailers. He came to a cinder block wall strung with barbed wire and deer skulls at the back of the compound, followed it to a metal gate topped with broken glass, and stopped. Jesse honked twice and waved at the security camera mounted above the gate. A moment later, he heard a click and the gate rattled open along its rusty rack, revealing a short alley of garage bays. The door of the tall middle bay hung halfway up, and Jesse could see 5 figures leaning over a diesel engine. He pulled up to the bay, cut the engine, and listened to his engine rattle to a halt. He got out and retrieved one of the garbage bags, then walked under the eave and waited. The bay was part of a body shop and part body shop and part everything else. Greasy power tools, air tools, various hand tools lay scattered across every available surface. A dismantled riding lawnmower was shoved into one corner next to an avocado green refrigerator, the door stained almost black with grimy handprints. Aerosol cans and taxidermy supplies lined several of the black shelves, while above them hung well over a dozen mounts, including a 12-point buck and a one-eyed black bear rumored to have killed 3 of the general's hunting dogs. None of the men bothered to look up, so Jesse ended up just standing there and holding the bag, shifting awkwardly from foot to foot. Jesse could see the general fiddling with the camshaft. Finally, one of them, a tall, blond, solid-built man in a pair of faded, grease-stained coveralls, looked up, made a sour face, then put down his wrench. He wiped his hands on an oil rag and headed over to Jesse. Chet was the general's nephew. Had gone to school with Jesse, and the two had hung out on occasion. These days, Chet was Jesse's contact man, Jesse never actually having talked directly with the general before. That's the way the general handled matters, at least small matters, and it had been made clear that Jesse was a small matter. Chet scratched at his thick handlebar mustache. Why, we was just talking about you, Jesse. Jesse squinted, wondered what that was supposed to mean. Nice of you to show up. Chet wore a big smile, what Jesse's grandmother used to call a crocodile smile. Saved me the bother of tracking you down. Yeah, well, here I am. Hope you don't have any plans for tonight, because if you did, they just got changed. Jesse's jaw tightened. Got a run for you. Short trip, just up to Charleston. Can't do it. Chet raised an eyebrow. Can't do it? Nope, I'm done with that. Chet pushed back his cap. I'm not liking the sound of this, Jesse. Why you got folks counting on you? I'm in a new line of business now. Is that so? Just what sort of business would that be? Jesse sat the garbage bag down. What's that? Something Santa left me. Chet eyed him. Ain't got time for your nonsense. Got a business proposal for the general. Shoot. You ain't the general. Chet squinted at him. You got something to say? Then you best say it to me. I'm here to see the general. Chet grabbed Jesse by his jacket collar, yanked him up onto his toes. Chet, a deep voice called out, hold on. Watch yourself, boy, Chet growled and gave Jesse a shove. The general walked over, followed by the other 3 men, all of them Boggses, nephews, cousins, and of one sort or another. They gave Jesse the once-over. The general wore the same get-up he had every time Jesse had seen him, a suede cowboy hat over his baldness, a matching fringed jacket like Daniel Boone might wear, and alligator boots. A bristling salt and pepper beard sprouted from his rough, wind-burned face. Jesse guessed the man was pushing his 60s now, pushing into his 60s by now. Even so, he still looked like he could hold his own against any comer. His real name was Samson Ulysses Boggs. His parents had given him a big name in the hopes he'd grow into it, but since the general stood a head shorter than most men, Jesse felt he was trying to compensate in other ways. He'd taken the reputation that Boggs' clan had built running shine back in the Prohibition and used it to strong-arm and intimidate his way into profitable, illegal activity in and around Boone County. "Go on, son," the general said. "So what do you got to say?" "Well," Jesse said, "I've got a proposal you might be interested in." "Have you?" "I do." Jesse tugged the garbage bag open so they could all see boxes of game consoles. "I don't play video games," the general said. "I got a truck full of them, and I can get more." "Can you now?" "Yes, sir. And I was thinking you and me should partner up. I got a handle on a steady supply and could sure use a bit of help distributing them." Jesse realized he was talking too fast and made himself slow down. "Be willing to go 50-50 the whole way." The general grinned at that, but Jesse didn't like the look of that grin. "And just how'd you come by these, boy?" the general asked. "Well," Jesse hesitated. "Well, sir, not really at liberty to say." "You're not?" "No, sir. We could just say Santa brought him to me." Jesse made a weak laugh, but no one else even cracked a smile. The old man stared at him. Nobody moved or spoke. Jesse didn't like the mood, didn't like the way this was playing out. Something wasn't right, and all at once he wanted to leave. The general nodded. Jesse knew the nod meant trouble, but before he could act, Chet caught hold of his arm. Jesse tried to twist free, but they were all on him. They dragged him over to the row of shop tools, forced his right hand into a drill press, held it over a plate, right where the bit pushed through once it got drilling, once it got spinning. Chet snatched up a roll of duct tape and began wrapping the tape around Jesse's hand and arm, round and round, strapping his hand to the press. Jesse struggled to yank his hand free, but it was bound tight. The men pushed him to his knees and held him fast. The general walked up. "Got a call from Dillard. Any idea what that might have been about?" Jesse's blood went cold. "He said you were talking crazy. Like maybe you turned snitch, start squealing if you didn't like the way he was treating you." Jesse shook his head. "That's not what..." The general kicked him in the gut. "Shut up." Jesse coughed and choked, struggling for breath. Chet tore off another piece of tape and wrapped it across Jesse's lips. The taste of glue filled Jesse's mouth, and his nostrils flared as he fought to get air into his lungs. "Talk like that makes me nervous," the general continued. "I believe you and me, we got a few things to work out. Let's start with what you got to lose. I hear you're pretty sweet on that guitar of yours. Ain't that what you said, Chet?" "Yep," Chet replied. "Why, I'm willing to bet he'd rather fiddle with that guitar than a hot slice of poontang pie. Told me his dream was to make it big down in Memphis." "Well, that's going to be hard with big holes in your hand." The general nodded, and Chet hit the switch on the drill. A high-pitched whine filled the bay. The half-smirk pushed at Chet's cheek as he slowly lowered the drill, lowered it until the spinning bit just nipped Jesse's skin. Jesse grit his teeth, struggled not to yell. Jesse let the drill sink near a quarter into Jesse's flesh. "Fuck," Jesse cried through the tape. Chet laughed, pulled the drill back up, leaving a dot of blood on the top of Jesse's hand. "Didn't tell you to stop," the general said. The humor left Chet's face. He looked at the general confused. But do it. What, you mean all the way? Hell yes, I mean all the way. Chet continued to stare at the general. You gone deaf? Press the fucking drill through his hand. Though he was just aiming to scare him, or thought he was just aiming to scare him. He didn't look scared enough to me. Now do it. I want to give him something to remember who he's fucking with. Chet still didn't move. The general's face twisted into something resembling a wadded up dish rag. He stepped over and jabbed a thick finger into Chet's chest. You need to learn to do as you're told, boy. He shoved Chet aside, nearly knocking him off his feet. The general took hold of the drill and leaned over Jesse. Next time your tongue feels like wagging, you'll want to remember this. The general slowly lowered the drill into Jesse's hand, driving it deep into his flesh. Searing pain shot up Jesse's arm. His palm felt on fire. He screamed and choked on the tape, tears squeezing from the corners of his eyes. Chet and the man winced as the drill punched completely through. The general didn't so much as blink, just nodded the way you do while enjoying your favorite song, letting the drill spin in place. Specks of tape, flesh, and blood spattered Jesse across the face, and the stench of seared flesh filled his nose. The general raised the drill and shut it off. The men let go of Jesse and slumped him against the drill stand, quivering. And he slumped against the drill stand, quivering. The general removed the handkerchief and wiped a speck of blood from his cheek. It's going to bother me if I don't repeat this. The general removed his handkerchief and wiped it across. And the general removed his handkerchief and wiped a speck of blood off his cheek, then squatted next to Jesse. You listen up, son, because you're only going to get this one time. If I ever hear talk about you spilling the beans, there won't be no more games. And if you ever cross me in any way, I'll put you and that pretty little girl of yours in a box, together, and bury both of you alive. That's a promise, Jesse. You just think about how that would be the next time you get a wild hair up your ass. You get me? Jesse nodded. We're good then, the general said and stood. He looked at Chet, looked him up and down. He looked at Chet, looked him up and down, looking in no way pleased. We're all squared up with Jesse now, so let him be. The men nodded, and the general headed across the bay and set up an open... Oh my gosh. Alexa, turn on the lamp.
Okay.
We're good then, the general said and stood. He looked at Chet, looked him up and down, looking in no way pleased. We're all squared up with Jesse now, so let him be. The men nodded, and the general headed across the bay and up a set of open stairs draped in flickering Christmas lights. He entered the second floor office, shutting the door behind him. The moment the general was out of sight, Chet flipped him the bird. Better watch that, warned the lean, wiry man standing to Chet's left. Leonard Boggs, who wore a sweat-stained cowboy hat with an eagle's feather stuck in the band. His father was a big Leonard Skinner fan, so Leonard had the good fortune to leave his name misspelled in tribute. Fuck, Chet said. That son of a bitch needs to chill the fuck out. Just because things is shit doesn't mean he's got to treat us that way. Pressure's getting to him, that's all. I remember not too long back when the general was about the only place you could get your fix around here. Now every tweakhead is brewing their own shit right in their own damn basements. General's losing ground, And in case you ain't noticed, he ain't taking it real well. And I don't care for none of this talk of hurting children either. Ain't the way we do things around here, not at all. Rules is changing. These meth heads, they ain't got no respect for the old ways. Goddamn tweakers, Chet spat. Goddamn meth. Fucking ruining everything. Well, that ain't all. I hear we got some competition. What are you talking about? Been some Charleston boys down here dealing. In Good Hope? You gotta be kidding. Wish I was. Overheard the general talking to Dillard. Apparently Dillard caught a few of them. Dillard? No shit. Bet that didn't go so well for him. You'd be right on that. Think they ended up in the deep of Ned's catfish farm? Leonard shrugged. Let's just say you won't find them eating anything caught out of that pond. Fuck, that Dillard's a scary sumbitch. Jesse ripped the duct tape from his mouth and let out a gasp. He tugged and tore at the wad around his arm, working to free his hand. Chet walked over. Bit of advice, Jesse. Just you let Dillard be. You might think you got a handle on that motherfucker, but you got no idea what he's capable of. Ain't none of your business. No, I guess not. But I've seen firsthand what he's done, and folks that's gone and gotten his way. But I've seen firsthand what he's done to folks that gone and gotten his way. It ain't a game with him. He'll make you disappear. Jesse ignored him, kept tearing at the tape. Don't believe me? Ask yourself this. Did anyone ever find trace of his wife? Some folks believe she ran off. Well, I know different. How do you know different? Leonard asked. Ain't gonna say. You're full of shit. Chet hesitated, seemed to be weighing something. Seen a picture of her dead body. Jesse's blood went cold. He stopped pulling at the tape and looked up at Chet. Chet held Leonard's gaze. He looked serious as a man could. A picture? Leonard asked. You're telling me you've seen a picture of Dillard's wife and she was dead? I'd just as soon not have. Where'd you see the picture? Dillard showed me. Bullshit. Yeah, he did. Now why would he do that? Fuck if I know. I still ain't got that man figured. It was a couple of months back when I was helping him move that old freezer into his garage. When we were done, he asked if I'd like to have a beer with him. Of course I would. Well, one beer turned into 2, then 4, then I don't rightly recall after that. I know we put down a couple of lawn chairs and got lit right there in his garage. I know after a bit he starts talking about his wife, how much he misses her. He's getting all choked up, but I'm smashed by then, so I just roll with it. He pulls a sewing box down half off the shelf, a fancy one, painted with pretty red roses. Says it used to belong to Ellen. Opens it up, and there's a wedding picture of her. Ellen was a right pretty woman in her day, I might add. He's staring at the picture like he wishes he could crawl right into it. I'd always heard she'd cleaned him out, so I muttered something about how sorry I was to hear she done him wrong. Then he says, yeah, she's sorry too, and something in his tone made me pay attention. He pries the back off that frame and pulls out a Polaroid. He stares at it a long while, his face cold as stone, then shows it to me. It was her, his wife. She was dead, no doubt about it, and it looked like she died bad. He says to me, never was a woman more sorry about anything. And the way he said it, why, it chilled me right to the bone. Damn, Leonard said. Ain't that some creepy shit? Yeah, you're sure right about that. Chet looked at Jesse. And that's why, if I were you, Jesse, I'd stay the fuck away from this guy. Ain't nothing good gonna come from messing with him, not for nobody. The blood drummed in Jesse's ears. He'd heard the rumors, but hearing Chet tell what he'd seen firsthand sent it home. A chill climbed Jesse's spine. His little girl was living with a man capable of cold-blooded murder. What else was he capable of? Jesse yanked the last bit of tape off and pulled his hand free. A dark red hole, about the diameter of a pencil, sat between his bones, the bones of his index finger and middle finger, welling with blood. He opened and closed his hand. It hurt, but all his fingers moved as they should. Whew!